Accused murderer Matthew Farwell is asking the court to release him back into his community while he awaits trial. And in response, the federal government listed new and highly disturbing evidence that details why that's a terrible idea. I'm going to talk about some sensitive topics such as child abuse and the death of a pregnant woman, so please keep yourself safe and scroll if you need to. Farwell is accused of the 2021 murder of Sandra Birchmore, who at the time was 23, but he's also accused of having groomed, coerced, and abused her since about age 12. And at the time of her death, Sandra was about 8 to 10 weeks pregnant with who Farwell believed was his child. Security footage shows Matthew Farwell entering Sandra Birchmore's apartment on the day that she died. The prosecution says that Farwell entered Sandra's apartment, took her life, and then staged her body by tying it to a closet door to make it look self-inflicted. And the very next day, while Sandra was deceased and undiscovered in her apartment, Farwell was at a nearby hospital welcoming his third child with his wife. Matthew Farwell is facing 2 federal charges. One is for the death of Sandra Birchmore, and the other is for the death of her unborn child. And now he wants to be released while he awaits his trial in October. He maintains that Sandra's death was a tragedy that she did to herself. While he paints himself as this upstanding member of society, a family man that served in Afghanistan, he said, "I'm not a danger to the community, I'm not a flight risk, and I'm not an obstruction risk, and you can't prove I am." And the government said, "Would you like us to show you what we know?" When Farwell was indicted back in 2024, they submitted an affidavit alongside that saying why he should be detained. And now the government has added 2 supplemental memorandums being like, he actually really needs to stay in jail. And a lot of this is stuff that we had never heard publicly before, including that Matthew Farwell's DNA was found on the ligature that was around Sandra Birchmore's neck. She was found tied to a closet door with a duffel bag strap around her neck that had his DNA on it. And her underwear tested positive for the presence of sperm cells. And that DNA found in Sandra Birchmore's underwear was a match for Matthew Farwell. There were also fingernail clippings that tested positive for DNA. These did not match Farwell. These samples were collected in May of 2021, but no meaningful conclusions could be drawn because state investigators did not obtain DNA from Farwell or anybody else. Just a reminder, usually murders are prosecuted at the state level. The FBI had to kind of intervene on this case because the state is refusing to prosecute this man. Anyway, it wasn't until August 2024 when the FBI got a search warrant to get a DNA sample for Farwell. And that's how they were able to identify that it was his DNA on the ligature, as well as in multiple locations on the underwear that Birchmore was wearing when she was found 3 days later. But he claimed the last time they had sex together was over 3 months prior in October 2020. This is from the Massachusetts State Police report on the initial interview with Matthew Farwell. Matt said that sometime in early 2020 he began a sexual relationship with Sandra, completely denying any inappropriate acts when she was a minor. He said that he maybe had sex with her 2 or 3 times since last year. He said the last time they had sex was October 2020. So Farwell denies any inappropriate contact with Sandra Birchmore when she was a child, but the federal government points out that he had multiple affairs with multiple women. So even though in his filing he's calling Sandra Birchmore his adult affair partner, the government points out that he's not treating her the way that he treated many of his other adult affair partners. The evidence indicates that Farwell's conduct was much more brazen in the non-criminal extramarital affair. Multiple witnesses disclosed to the FBI that Farwell had told them about at least one of his extramarital affairs, in contrast with Sandra Birchmore, who he was actively trying to keep a secret. And apparently several of his former colleagues at the Stoughton Police Department have given the FBI data about Farwell. One witness indicated that when he was at work in the fall of 2020, Farwell started texting feverishly and taking private phone calls. This is around the time that Sandra is telling him that she's pregnant with his child. Farwell indicated that he had to put crazy back in the bag and then everything would be okay. And the day after Sandra Birchmore died, Matthew Farwell texted that same witness to ask if the witness was working and whether anything was going on at work because he was, quote, bored as hell sitting in the hospital. Because again, his wife gave birth the day after he allegedly went and killed Sandra Birchmore. A different coworker told the FBI that about 2 weeks before Birchmore's death, the coworker told Farwell that he was looking stressed. And Farwell indicated he was having relationship problems with a woman other than his wife. When this witness asked if they could help, Farwell said the problem was going to take care of itself. Farwell argued that he's not a flight risk because in the time between Sandra Birchmore's death and his arrest, he didn't try to flee. He was living with his wife and their kids. But the prosecution points out that his circumstances have changed drastically. And for about 3.5 years, he probably thought he was going to get away with this crime, so there was no reason to flee. The Massachusetts State Police and the Canton Police Department had identified Matthew Farwell on the security footage about 5 days after Sandra died. And when they realized it was Farwell, they met him for an interview. And during that interview, Farwell was not asked to provide a DNA sample or evidence whatsoever from his personal phone. And because at the time Farwell was a police officer, he would understand that if he was actually a suspect, they would take his DNA and they would take his phone. The prosecution also says that Farwell tried to convince others of how Sandra Birchmore died. 2 witnesses separately disclosed that in the months after Birchmore's death, while Farwell was on leave from the police department, that he purported to reenact her death. They say that at a small private gathering, an intoxicated Farwell was discussing it. Farwell sat down under a doorknob and demonstrated the position in which Birchmore was found, assuring the skeptical witnesses that it was possible for someone to self-inflict in that manner. At the time, it had not been publicly revealed that Birchmore was found hanging from a doorknob. The prosecution is also against Farwell's release because they're concerned about other criminal conduct he engaged in. They say the year after Sandra Birchmore died that Farwell had met a young woman at a bar, and the next thing she remembers that night is waking up naked in her bed as Farwell was walking around her bedroom looking for his keys. After the incident, the woman was concerned about what, if anything, had happened, and she texted Farwell. He responded by confirming they had sex and told her they should do it again. In his motion, Farwell brought up how the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner had ruled Sandra Birchmore's death as self-inflicted. But the feds say that medical examiner was missing key evidence. They notified the medical examiner that antidepressant medication were found at the scene, but they didn't tell her about a broken necklace found at the front of Sandra's body. This is a pink flamingo necklace on a gold chain that she wore all of the time. And not only was it broken, but it wasn't preserved for the medical examiner to inspect. Did it break because of a faulty clasp, or was it ripped off by the chain? Sandra's family had to preserve that evidence when they went through her apartment. They say the medical examiner also didn't know that Farwell had just told Birchmore he was arriving at her apartment the moment that her phone locked for the final time. And also that he was in her apartment when her phone recorded its final step data. And that Sandra's phone was never accessed again whatsoever after Matthew Farwell was seen on surveillance video leaving her apartment. She was also unaware that his DNA was on the ligature around Sandra's neck, and she did not know that Farwell had recently searched the closet where she was hung. About a week and a half before her death, Sandra texted 2 different people about Matthew Farwell looking at her closet. He asked me if I'd give him a key and said that if I keep it secret, he'll be around and see them and all that, so it's somewhere. Then he looked in my closet and then the bathroom, but I don't know why. I still haven't figured that out yet. And then to a different person, but last night he opened my closet door for something, then went into my bathroom looking at my bathroom, and then I have a dolly in my living room that he asked why, and it was just really odd. He started looking around. I don't know. It was also not revealed to the medical examiner that a witness had called the Stoughton Police Department and exposed Matthew Farwell's relationship with Sandra Birchmore. The medical examiner did not notice that the injury to Birchmore's clavicle, which was caused while Birchmore was alive, matched the buckle of the knot found behind Birchmore's head, suggesting that she could not have died in the position where she was found. All of that was from the first supplemental memo on why Farwell should stay in jail. The second one is much shorter. This is from 2 days ago, and they were like, look, we just got this data from Matthew Farwell's phone, but it's damning, so we're going to add this second supplemental memo. And I cannot show you the paragraph where they describe his internet proclivities. Suffice to say, he was accessing adult material that contained key phrases like barely legal, shocked and impregnated, and teen stepsister. The prosecution says this shows his continued interest in teen girls. They also point out that Farwell would often require Birchmore to pretend as though she was 13 or 14 years old during, or that she should pose as his sister and simulate non-consensual. After years of trying to get justice, Sandra's family hired Dr. Michael Bodden, a forensic pathologist known for his work on high-profile cases, and he concluded that Sandra Birchmore's death was a homicide by strangulation, specifically mentioning that her hyoid bone was broken, which happens far more frequently in strangulations. The day the media began to report on Dr. Bodden's conclusions, Matthew Farwell wrote a note in his notes app. The note was written to a close friend of Matthew Farwell, and it was basically a goodbye letter, saying he wishes this had all gone a different way, asking his friend not to forget his wife and step in and raise the children, saying this is the hardest thing he's ever done, and indicating he would see his friend on the other side. And the prosecution says this is probative of Farwell's state of mind regarding his intent to flee or otherwise not appear for trial. Courts have held that ideations like those expressed by Matthew Farwell can constitute a risk of flight, essentially saying, yeah, he might not get on a plane, but he's going to try to find a way to not be at that trial. His trial starts this October unless something changes, which things change all the time in court. I just hope Sandra's family doesn't have to wait too much longer to see him behind bars for the rest of his life. That's everything I know about this. Love you guys. Drink water. Bye!